Good morning, everyone. And this morning we're going to talk about behaviour at Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council, particularly in regard to its planning committee. And before I start, I just want to say I'm not a political person. I have time for none of these parties. I haven't voted for many decades now, and the likelihood is I never will. I think my vote is too important to give away to some of these individuals here. And here is a classic example of that. It says DUP councillor facing conflicts of interest probe appointed chair of the governance committee. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. Anyway, we'll scroll on down. And there she is, Mrs. Linda Clarke, along with her husband, Mr. Trevor Clarke, MLA. And it goes on to say that Mrs. Clarke, a councillor, is under investigation for alleged conflicts of interest in Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council's decision-making process. And she has been appointed chair of its committee on governance. You couldn't make it up, like I said. You just could not. Anyway, as we see here, Linda Clarke is being probed by a standards watchdog over her role in planning and public funding decisions at Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council. It doesn't really shock me that, but I'm pretty sure they've been disheartened or disappointed that they've been caught out. But we'll go on down a bit. And it says an investigation was launched in 2019. After it emerged, Mrs. Clarke did not declare an interest on planning applications lobbied on by her husband, DUP MLA Trevor Clarke. And Mr. Clarke ran a business on the side that represented developers' interests in an attempt to get a planning approval for forthcoming developments. And it goes on to say a further complaint was made after it was revealed Mrs. Clarke was involved in awarding more than £4,500 in council contracts to her son's printing firm. Dear oh dear, eh? Talk about getting caught with your pants down. But as we see, it says here, DUP councillor suspended from planning committee over applications lobbied on by MLA. And her MLA happened to be her husband, Mr. Trevor Clarke. So we'll click here and see what it brings up. And here we go. It says DUP councillor suspended from planning committee over applications lobbied on by MLA. And this is a watchdog found Mr. John Smith, DUP councillor, who was the mayor, failed to declare an interest when his employer, Mr. Trevor Clarke, made representations to the planning committee. There's Mr. Smith there in his mayoral robes on the right, and there's Mr. Clarke on the left. And the DUP councillor has been suspended for 3 months from a council planning committee for failing to declare interests on applications his MLA employer was lobbying on. Mr. John Smith, a councillor on Antrim and Newtownabbey Borough Council, works in the constituency office of DUP South Antrim MLA Trevor Clarke. A standards watchdog found Mr. Smith breached the code of conduct by not declaring an interest or leaving the meeting when Mr. Clarke made representations to the planning committee. But the problem was that Mr. Clarke's spouse, Mrs. Linda Clarke, also didn't leave the meeting when representations were made to the planning committee. The case related to a meeting in 2019 when Mr. Clarke spoke on 3 applications, including one he was representing as an agent through a controversial planning consultancy business, which he owned, called Versatile Consultancy. But Mr. Clarke's wife, Mrs. Linda Clarke, also suffered a 3-month suspension. She wouldn't leave the planning committee meetings either, even when the council lawyer pointed out that there could possibly be a conflict of interest here. She sat on. I mean, some people would use the word corrupt. I couldn't possibly comment. But it does typify everything that's wrong with the planning process within Antrim Newtownabbey Borough Council. I have said many times on this channel that it needs to be taken back off councils and handed back to the DRD as quickly as possible, because this is rotten to the core. Mrs. Clarke is a DUP councillor for the Dunsily area, and she too, like Mr. Smith, worked in her husband's constituency office in South Antrim. A hearing was told Mrs. Clarke sat in the council's planning committee in May 2017 when her husband made representations on 2 applications. He was noted in council records as representing the applicant. And there it's there. Mrs. Clarke had received guidance from the council's lawyer earlier that month, advising of a possible conflict of interest. The hearing told the councillor had apologised in submissions to the watchdog, and that was to Assistant Commissioner Mr. Ian Gordon, and he found Mrs. Clarke had breached 3 sections of the councillor's code of conduct relating to declaring interests. Mr. Gordon, the Assistant Commissioner, said the councillor, Mrs. Clarke, did not display insight into her actions and did not accept her conflict of interest until very recently. I mean, quite disgraceful. But, you know, like I say, I don't vote. Other people do. But you need to know that the type of individuals that you're actually voting for. And as I've often said before, you don't know half of what goes on in these public bodies because they're not run for your benefit. They're run exclusively for the benefit of the people that work in them. And here is a classic example of that. Well, as always, tell me what you think, leave your comments, and I'll see you all in the next video.